All right, well, we're going to get rolling then. I know we're getting a little bit of a late start, and people will probably trickle in, and that's perfectly okay. Couple things. My name's Aaron Sams. Hi. I'm often associated with this crazy thing called the flipped classroom or flipped learning. So you know, I didn't come up with the term. It kind of got attached to me along the way over the past few years. It's kind of a strange term. I think it kind of puts the concept into a bit of a box, and what I'd like to do is to try to crawl out of the box today, show you where I think flipped learning fits into a bigger picture of education, and where I think this can lead you as an educator. And I think right after Dr. Steger's talk, this is going to be a valuable tool, especially for those of you who are practicing teachers, as to, I think, how to transition from a very teacher-centered environment to a student-centered environment to try to incorporate a lot of the stuff he was talking about today, using this concept called the flipped classroom. A couple things. Twitter, Chemical Sam's, you can find me on there. I have not been tweeting much at all since June, mostly because of major life transitions, moving to Pittsburgh for one, from Colorado. And to be honest, I find Twitter to be like a life-draining suck of my emotional energy. I get really invested, and I get really engaged, and my wife is like, what is going on with you? Turn Twitter off. And so I've chosen to disengage for the past few months. So I've been markedly absent there. You can email me. I get lots of emails, so if I ignore you, just keep saying, hey, I emailed you last week, and I will follow up with you, I promise. More importantly, though, than my stuff is probably these places where you can go to interact and learn more information. Okay, flippedclassroom.org. That is a Ning site. It's a professional network. We've got rapidly approaching 10,000 educators, if not 10,000 already, where it's exploded over the last year. We went from literally under 1,000 to 10,000 educators in a year. I mean, so growing exponentially. So that's a great place to go and get ideas, share ideas, ask lots of questions. I was a high school chemistry teacher. I don't know anything about third grade reading. So if you are a elementary reading teacher, I'm not your person. This place will be a great place to go for resources. Flippedlearning.org. That's a new nonprofit website that myself and a couple of my colleagues have started to basically do a couple things, to promote the idea of this flipped classroom, flipped learning, to conduct some research. We have some students at George Mason University that are doing a lit review and some background research. Come on in, it's okay. Come on in, feel free to interrupt. There is a camera, you might want to go carefully around there. But a great place for resources, for emerging research as it comes out, and also we do regional workshops periodically. I don't have one scheduled in Western PA yet. I'm doing one in New York, and we have one in Connecticut coming up. But you can find out information there. We're doing a bunch of webinars, a series of, I think, 14 webinars over the next 9 months. So you can check that out, all subject area and grade level specific. Okay, now for today's session, this is going to be kind of an interactive session with follow-up. So if you go to this site, goo.gl, that's Google's URL shortener if you don't know, /CLVDT. That's a lowercase l, okay? I tried to get one without O's. I keep hitting make URL until I get one that's actually readable. But that's a lowercase l, CLVDT. So this is going to take you to a site called Classroom Salon. And that's a project that I'm working with a professor at Carnegie Mellon, and he has created, and his graduate students have created a site called Classroom Salon. It's a way to interact with text, a way to interact with video, to post comments, to locate hotspots in these things. So it's a really cool project, and we're kind of testing it out here. But I will be on there over the next few weeks. I would invite all of you to go there and join. You'll just have to submit your email address to create an account. And then interact there and ask lots of questions and post things later on. And we'll talk more about that later. All right, so that's just kind of some background. So if you forget everything you heard, go to these places and you should be able to find it. By the way, this is being recorded, and it will be posted on the Classroom Salon site. So if you want to refer other people to this presentation later on, you're welcome to go there. Okay, so there's got to be a better way.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone? The Great Depression, passed the, anyone? The tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which, anyone, raised or lowered? Raised tariffs. in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression. Today, we have a similar debate over this. Anyone know what this is, class? Anyone? Anyone? Anyone seen this before? The Laffer curve. Anyone know what this says? It says that at this point on the revenue curve, you will get exactly the same amount of revenue as at this point. This is very controversial. Does anyone know what Vice President Bush called this in 1980? Anyone? Something DOO economics. Voodoo economics.
All right. So we knew that that was boring and horrible in 1986 when Ferris Bueller's Day Off came out, right? How many years later, and yet some of us are still this teacher. I was that teacher for the first part of my teaching career. Guilty. Okay? How many of you have sat in that classroom or are still that teacher? Okay? We're stuck. We're locked in there because a lot of us teach the way we were taught, and it's hard to break that mold. So what I hopefully, again, like I mentioned earlier, I want to show you a transition from this to hopefully a glimmer of what Dr. Steger was talking about with the very student-centered environment, and I made that transition through something called the flipped classroom. So let's talk about that. In case you haven't noticed, we're going through some growing pains in education, some really crazy transitions right now. I think 80-90% of the transition we're finding in education is due to the fact that we have this thing called the internet now. Okay? Information is not a commodity. We used to go to schools because that's where textbooks and teachers were, and that's where all the information resided. So we went to the school to get the stuff. Well, the stuff is out there. Now we don't have more information, more stuff than we know what to do with. So it completely changes the role of the teacher and the role of the school itself. So we're moving from this and this. Yeah, we're stuck, like I said. We've got this beautiful facility, and we're stuck with this kind of learning environment. And we're trying to get to this. Okay? That's what we heard this morning. Is how do we get to these crazy student-centered learning environments? I think our problem is largely this. Okay, because we heard this morning, we know what to do. We know how to get there. We know better. So how do we get from this to this? Well, we as teachers, we have these glimpses, we have these glimmers in when we teach. Come on in, it's okay. You can interrupt, I'm flexible. Okay, or not, you can hang on the doorway, that's fine too. Okay, we're trying to get there. We know how to do this. You ever have one of those lessons or those projects that you just, yeah, that was amazing. And you wish you could do your entire classroom like that. So we know that those things are out there, and we know how to do these things. And what I think is the way to do this is we got to go from the bottom up. Okay? I was a classroom teacher for 12 years. This is the first fall in the last 12 years of my life that I have not been teaching. I'm actually a student again, and I'm a director of digital learning at a small grad school here in Pittsburgh now. But it's a very different transition. But what I'm going to share with you today are stories from teachers. This is not policy. These are not think tank people. These are not politicians. These are not professionals. These are classroom K-12 teachers and what they've done to leverage technology to meet the needs of their students to get to a student-centered learning environment. Now, one thing you always have to keep in mind is that we have to drive what we're doing with our pedagogy, with good teaching practice. We can't get enamored by things that are shiny and have pictures of apples on them. I love things that are shiny that have pictures of apples on them, okay? But that's not where it starts. We use those things to support what is already good teaching practice to make it better. All right. So 2 questions that I want to drive our conversation with today. The first one is, what role does direct instruction play in the classroom? I believe that it has a place. Let me just full disclosure there. Okay? I believe direct instruction has a place in the classroom. I just don't believe it has a place in the large group for the entire class at the same time. Now, I think a more valuable question, however, is what is the most valuable use of the class time I have with my students? What is the most valuable use of the time I have with that very brief, whether it's 48 minutes, that's the only time you see those students in a day, or maybe you have them all day, but what's the most valuable use of that time? You have them physically present with you in the room. All right. So you come to the session on the flipped classroom. It's hard to pick up an education journal, read anything in education without hearing the term, the word. It's out there. It's buzzing like crazy. I don't really like the term, to be perfectly honest. I'm uncomfortable with it. That said, I just published a book called Flip Your Classroom. Figure ride this wave until it crashes into the shore, right? So that's what I'm doing. Book number 2 coming out, same thing. Okay, so what in the world is it? Let's kind of get some basics, some fundamentals, some commonalities. Now, to be honest, it's kind of like nailing Jello to a wall. It's really hard to kind of pin this thing down. Part of that has been intentional. By those of us who use these techniques in our classroom, we have been reluctant to say you have to do it this way or you can't call it flipped classroom. We don't want to do that. What we want to do is model good teaching and model good teaching tools and say, use what's going to work for you. We don't want to make it a thing that has to be refined and then policymakers start saying, well, you have to have 14 teachers in your school that are using the flipped classroom or we remove state funding. We don't want that. Okay, so what is it? Basically, we're leveraging video. We are harnessing the power of video, simply created, teacher-created video, to deliver direct instruction outside of the class time. Now, usually, that's described as what you were doing in the class live, you're now doing at home, and what you were doing at home for homework, you're now doing in the class. That's a pretty simplistic explanation. I like to call that Flipped Class 101. Because everybody I know who's doing this started here, but nobody that I know stopped here. Okay? This is the entry point. This is how you get started. Now, does it have to be done at home? And I'll talk more about that, and the answer to that is no. Basically, here's a better description. This description is from my colleague in San Francisco. His name is Ramsey Musalem. He says, we need to remove direct instruction from the large group whole class learning space and shift it into the individual learning space. Okay, so taking large group instruction from the direct instruction out of the large group learning space into the individual learning space. Now, that doesn't have to be done at home, doesn't have to be done on the bus to a soccer game, but it can be. It could be done at lunch, it could be done in class when they're ready for it. It looks different in different applications of this, but this kind of large group direct instruction, I've already lost 30% of you. Some of you are going, you're looking at the schedule going, man, this guy knows what he's talking about, I've already heard all this stuff. Where else can I be that's a better use of my class time? If that's you, please, you are more than welcome to go somewhere else. That is okay. You will not insult me, I promise. Okay, maybe you will, but I won't say anything about it. But we got to get away from this large group information dissemination model into an individualized, personalized model. We'll get there. Okay, now some of you might be saying, well, that's a lot like blended learning, where they're doing some stuff online through this video being delivered outside the classroom, and a lot in class. Yes, there is a lot of overlap between this idea of the flipped classroom and blended learning. I see blended learning more as an institutional approach. We are a blended learning institution. This is a blended learning class versus a flipped classroom or flipped learning being a tool that an individual teacher is kind of leveraging. Now, you can scale it up. There are schools that are saying we are a flipped school. There's a high school in Michigan, a guy named Greg Green is a principal there. Said, you know what, we got nothing to lose, we're underperforming, we're all going to just use this as our approach to delivering all direct instruction. And it's working on an institutional level. So yes, there's a lot of overlap. I don't have time to go into kind of the nuance of the difference and the same things, but talk to me later and we can talk about blended learning. By the way, these are really great blenders. It's called a blend tag. My wife just got one. Holy cow, man. It will pulverize like an iPad if you threw it in there. It's crazy. All right. Now, how many of you went to the salon, the classroom salon site before here? Like you got information about that? A few of you. Okay. I wasn't sure that a lot of that information went out, so I am going to still show the video. But this video is on the Classroom Salon site, so I would invite you to, again, to go to this URL, sign up for the Classroom Salon, and make comments about the video and ask questions, and I will be on there over the next couple of weeks answering those and following up if you have additional questions. So it'll be a great way to extend this conversation later on. But this is a picture of my classroom. This was put together by TechSmith. They make software, Camtasia and Jing, if you know that. Good friends of mine. I don't work for them. I'm not paid by them. They just buy me beer and give me free software occasionally because they like what's going on. So that's some disclosure there. I'm Aaron Sams, and I teach science here at Woodland Park High School. My ultimate goal, I guess, as a teacher is to help students become learners who can learn for themselves and by themselves. One of the problems that I was guilty of even prior to flipping my classroom around was the classroom was centered around me. I told them exactly what to learn, how to learn it, what assignments to do to learn it, and when to learn it, and how to prove to me that they learned it. I don't do that anymore. We changed the place in which content is delivered. Instead of standing in front of a class and delivering, here's how you do this type of problem, here's how this works, I deliver that direct instruction now asynchronously at home
through these videos that we make with Camtasia Studio.
Times till whole.
Oh, we didn't do that last time.
The last step, they were already whole numbers. We had 1, 1, and 4. Here we don't have a whole number. So here's a few little tricks when you need to multiply by whole numbers. If one of your numbers ends in 0.5, you're going to multiply by 2.
Or something 0.5 times it by 2.
Right.
Okay, write this down, guys.
Yes. If something ends in 0.3 or 0.33 or 0.66, you multiply by 3.
And when the kids come to class, they don't show up to learn new stuff. They show up to apply the things that they learned at home and to ask me questions about the things they learned at home. So now they could have my lesson, if you will, what I would normally have stood up and lectured to them in class with some added features. They get that at home, and then what they were expected to do for homework is now what they do in my class. Life is different for me because I no longer am the guy who stands up in the front of the classroom and just yaks at his students for an hour or however long the class is. Now I walk around the class and I help kids. I'm a tutor, I'm a guide, I'm the putter-outer of fires, whatever it happens to be in my crazy chemistry class. I walk around and do that. I don't stand up front and teach under the kind of the traditional model. I'm Aaron Sams. I'm a teacher, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, and I love Camtasia Studio.
So this was kind of my transition point here. This was, I don't know, a couple years old now. This was me getting away from me driving the class, us all doing the same thing at the same time, moving toward a more student-centered environment. Again, this is not where I landed. This was my transition point of using these videos to archive content and make it available to students when they needed it. Now, this was still very content heavy. Driving with content, most of the projects I was doing in my class were follow-up to content. We'll talk about that in the context of Bloom's here in just a minute. Now, if you decide to adopt some of the flipped classroom approach, it does not come without criticism. It does not come without some raised eyebrows. Now, here are the common ones that are floating around out there in internet land, blogosphere, and whatnot. Usually it's because people have not done their homework and research and realize that we've published a lot of material about these myths and misconceptions. But here's what you are going to hear from your colleagues. Flipped learning is all about videos. Yes, video is an important tool to deliver the instructional content, but it doesn't stop with just creating video. Video are easy to create now, easy to archive content, and easy to deliver to our students. Okay? So it's a great way to deliver instruction instead of doing it in a large group. So it's a valuable part. I would almost say an essential component, but not quite, because I know some teachers are like, yeah, I basically use the same thing, but I don't do any video. That's fine. But it's a very valuable, powerful medium to get content to students. The next thing is that flipped learning creates a digital divide. What about the kid who doesn't have internet at home? Okay. Number one, that's a very legitimate concern. You cannot proceed, if you are requiring students to view video, you cannot proceed until you provide access to all students. You have to do that. That's very important. However, not an insurmountable hurdle. People, we can work with this, okay? So I had 25% of my students in Woodland Park, Colorado who did not have the internet at home. So I said, how do I get this video content to them? Okay, you have a computer at home? Great. We'll put it on a flash drive, take it home. No computer? Burn on DVD, put in DVD player, press play. For me, I was able to deliver the content to all my students with those methods. Now, that might not be the case for you. You might have a student who doesn't have a DVD player. I had one student tell me I don't have a DVD player. I put $40 down on the table, and I said, go to Walmart and get one. And he said, oh, no, I have one. When he saw I was willing to pony up and provide him the resource he needed, he backed off. He was just trying to get out of his work. Okay? So, yes, it's a very legitimate concern. Solve the problem. It's a problem that is meant to be solved. Now, I have a standing order with my colleagues. When you get rid of your personal computer, I want it. And I tear them apart and refurbish them and I give them to students. It's a solution. You don't have to give every kid a brand new, shiny MacBook Pro. It doesn't have to be. Just get something in their hands so they can do it. Put it on a flash drive, put it on a cell phone, put it on an iPod, put it on any sort of electronic device that you can buy for really, really cheap. Write a grant. Get a classroom set. There are ways to solve this problem. So don't let that deter you. It's a legitimate concern, but don't let it stop you. Okay. This one I think is a little more, we should definitely deal with it. Homework. Do you have to give video assignments at home? The answer is no. That's what I did. I lived and worked in a community where homework was for high school students was expected. Now, some of you are in communities where homework is a big no-no. That is family time. You do not get to send work home. I get that. I have small kids. I understand that. Okay? If that's the case, don't give it as homework. There are communities where students have to work to provide money, to put food on the table, or watch their younger siblings when parents are working multiple jobs. I understand that. I get that. Don't give homework then, if that's a concern for you. However, what that might drive you to do is to do a rethink of your class time or your school day. Do we have to go from class to class to class to lunch to class to class to class? Or maybe we need to give them some time to sit on a couch with their feet up, with their work in their lap, to just decompress and get some stuff done. It doesn't have to be done at home. Or maybe in your classroom you need to make sure that the time in which you have the students, they can do all of the work for your class. Maybe that's something you need to do. Maybe you're going to sacrifice some of the content. Maybe you're only going to get to 80% of those state standards. I don't know. But you might want to do a rethink. So it's a legitimate concern, and it does need to be addressed. I have some anecdotes that I'll save for another time. Maybe if you come to the second session, I can talk about this. Okay, flipped learning propagates bad teaching. Are we simply recording lectures? We know from lots and lots of research that the lecture is not the best mode of disseminating information. Okay, maybe 10% you might retain 10% of what you hear, right? Something like that. So let me show you some examples of some videos that some of my colleagues have made from around the country, and some Canadians in here as well. Now, some of these are great, some of these are not so great, some of these are like way too crazy and noisy, some of these are awesome. So these are not necessarily exemplars, they're just examples of some possibilities of what you can do. And tell me how these differ from a recorded lecture. By the way, this one's alongside as well.
When using his superpowers, the superhero A will say his name and put up his big muscle arms and say A.
A.
Number 13, hat. The girl wore a big hat.
Distance from 0 to 1 is the same as the distance from 1 to 2. Likewise, it's the same as the distance from 2 to 3.
Now with those phrases, what we can do is simply say me gusta and then attach them to the end. So, an example, I could say, picking from that list, me gusta tocar la guitarra, me gusta cantar.
Well, see, you guys had developed this massive bomb that you used on Japan after World War II. And we wanted it to be big and bad as well and powerful. So we started to try to create nuclear weapons to rival yours.
And of course we have command economies. Other words for those are planned, centrally planned, command and control, or socialism.
Welcome class. Today I will be sharing with you how to make a fruit smoothie. These things are scrumdiddlyumptious, tasty good.
Because, as you can see, it's fizzing right here. It's producing a gas. And it's bubbling over.
Tendons, as you see here, connect muscles to bones. Here you see the gastrocnemius, the calf muscle, being connected to the calcaneus.
Another thing I want to talk about is cells are not boring. When I grew up, I had this idea that a cell was like a bag of jelly and you had stuff like a nucleus inside it and it would essentially float around.
Here in Woodland Park, we're at a higher altitude, so the temperature is actually boiling at 92 degrees Celsius.
A biography is a story, a non-fiction story, written about someone by someone else. And I have an example here. It is my Lady Gaga biography.
Obviously 8, yeah. And that gives us a molar mass of 44 grams.
Pringles potato chip bag. Now compared to what we saw, it's totally full. Foil's a lot of action.
Diagram 2 is right triangles. Hypotenuse is across from the right angle.
Legs are A and B, and hypotenuse C.
Plug the numbers in and see how easy it can be.
A squared plus B squared equals C squared. A squared plus B squared equals C squared.
Here in the middle, we have two friendly sumo wrestlers who are eating some or eating the sushi roll, okay? The one on the left is eating 3/4 of the sushi roll.
I'm excited, you're excited, I know you guys just want to get through algebra, and so you want to get through it, and I'm going to get to it. We're going to talk about radicals and square roots, and the difference between the two is very slight. This little sign right here, this symbol, is called a radical.
All right, so yes, direct instruction is involved here. But that's a lot more engaging than just simply camera on somebody at a whiteboard, right? Now, that's not to say you cannot deliver good, decent instructional video with the camera on a whiteboard. But there are ways to make this a lot more engaging. Now, another misconception, and we're kind of still stuck in Flip Classroom 101 here, is that flipped learning requires Flipped learning requires front loading with video. And what I mean by that is watch video first, do something to apply it, assess. Video in the beginning of that cycle of learning. Okay? There are a lot of teachers right now going, okay, started out with, made the video great. But what I'm finding is that that video fits better in the middle of a cycle of learning, in the middle of a learning cycle, in the middle of an inquiry cycle. And I use it in the midst of project-based learning. Or I do this as a follow-up and an extension after we've done in-class direct instruction. So I want to spend the remainder of our time talking about ways that you can use video in your classroom that does not require front-loading with video and driving the instruction with the instructional video, but using it as a resource in the middle of a cycle of learning. Because I really think this is the transitional point I was talking about, going from the teacher-centered, content-driven classroom to a student-centered classroom that still maintains quality control over the content and still has the content there when it's necessary, when it's needed for student learning. Okay, so let's talk blooms. Okay, we all know this, we've all seen this, we've all learned about this. Again, this is not the be-all and end-all of educational theory, but it's a good way to kind of frame our understanding of things. The bottom two tiers of Bloom's taxonomy, remembering and understanding, these two components, I think, really lend themselves well to instructional video, to teacher-created content. The stuff you just kind of got to know and just kind of have floating around in your head. Now, usually, in a front-loading model, we start with some direct instruction, and then we work our way up. They're going to apply, maybe do some analysis, and then hopefully we get to maybe a unit capstone project where they do something, some sort of creation or at least some evaluating at the end of a unit. So we're working our way up Bloom's. Perfectly legitimate way to approach learning. Some courses will just naturally lend themselves to that. But it's not the only way to approach it. So I was actually, about a year ago now, I was on an airplane to Oslo, Norway, and I was thinking, I know, I'm going to invert Bloom's taxonomy. And I thought I was really clever, right? And then I Googled it when I got on the ground, and there's no in-flight Wi-Fi. Lauren Anderson was a student of Benjamin Bloom. Beat me to it by about a decade. Anyhow, you think you had a new idea. Somebody beat you to it. Anyhow, so Lauren Anderson inverted the pyramid here and basically said, we want kids up here most of the time. So then I said, well, let's kind of approach this different. Let's take a top-down approach. Now, there's other articles that have been written since then that said you can kind of enter at any point, go up and down, in and out, whatever, that's fine, and that's great. But if we have a top-down approach to Bloom's, we're starting with the creating aspect. So you're starting with a project or a problem to solve in mind. But eventually, the kid's going to get stuck, and they're going to need to tap down into some content, and that's where you as the teacher, the diagnostician, the professional is going to intervene and provide them with the resource that they need to move on. Let me give you an example. I had a student. She was doing a project with me, kind of an advanced study class, and she wanted to design a fuel cell where she would collect solar energy and electrolyze water with it, store the hydrogen and oxygen, and then use a fuel cell technology where she would take the hydrogen and oxygen that she collected from the electrolysis of water and use that to charge her cell phone. That's what she wanted to do. So I said, go. And she just started researching what she would need to do and go. She got to the point where she needed to use some electrochemistry. How did she turn that chemical energy into electricity? I said, you know what, you need to figure out how a galvanic cell works, and you need to figure out how that applies to gases. Well, guess what? For my AP chemistry class, I had a 10-minute lesson on galvanic cells, and I had a 2-minute explanation on how that applied to gases. I said, go watch those. Ask me if you have any questions. So, okay, so she was up here. She was creating her project, doing some evaluation of the process, and she got stuck. I said, tap down into this remembering understanding area where I had created an instructional video. She watched it and said, okay, good, thanks, Sam, moving on. Boom, back to work on her project. But what I was able to do is instead of explaining it to her right there, I said, you know what, got that archived, go. Now, I could have just as easily referred her to a textbook, but having had the student in the past, I knew she was not a big reader. And I knew she loved her some YouTube. So guess what? That's what I did. I directed her to my YouTube channel. I said, go find it, search for this term, and that's where she found it. So that's a top-down approach versus a bottom-up approach. All right. So flip class 201. This is kind of where, this was my next step. After I had a library of instructional video, so I created videos with my colleague. We assigned those as homework the night before. Our kids came to class. They were ready to go. After a year of that, we had this library of videos for our entire chemistry and AP chemistry curriculum. We looked at it and we said, huh, the content's there, the course is there, everything's built, it's all in our learning management system. Why does a kid have to go through this at my pace? Why can't they blast through it as fast as they want or work through it at a pace that's appropriate to their learning abilities? We said, okay, we're going to have, I'm going to put it in quotes, a self-paced class. Now, we still taught from September to May, so it's not truly self-paced, but it was extremely flexible. Called a flex-paced class. So students would come and they would work on whatever they were ready to work on next. Now, at this point, we're still very content-driven, still very kind of bottom-up approach to Bloom's. But what this component led us to is some greater ways to assess our students. So let me talk about that here in a minute. So what we did is we took a mastery learning approach in our classroom. We said we have the content here. These are the things we need our students to know. It's based on state standards. It's based on national stuff. It's based on our professional judgment. We had 100 objectives, learning objectives, that we wanted our students to learn and master by the end of our chemistry course. Okay, so roughly 10 objectives over the course of 10 units-ish. So we delivered all the direct instruction on video. Practice and application was all done in class with us around there to help them and intervene when they got stuck. We would then assess, and if they got stuck, we would remediate and continue the remediation and assessment cycle. Okay, mastery-based learning, where they had to demonstrate competency before they moved on to the next thing. This type of model lends itself really well to something that kind of has a learning sequence. Okay, you really need to know your chemical alphabet before you can make chemical words. Atoms make molecules. You really need to know kind of how those words work before you can put together chemical sentences. Molecules interacting to make a chemical equation. You really need to know how those sentences operate in order to write a chemical paragraph to solve a problem with a particular chemical reaction. Okay? There's just kind of a natural growth and progression. Okay, math teachers in the room, anybody? Okay. Algebra 2. If a kid got a D- in Algebra 1, how are they going to do in Algebra 2? Now, maybe they're super geniuses and just didn't do any of their work. They're probably going to be fine. But a lot of kids, what do? We're just shoving them through. They turn in enough boxes of Kleenex and got enough extra credit to eke out that D- to get their parents off their back. And then we put them in Algebra 2 and they're like, man, I can't solve 3x equals 6. How in the world can I do a parabola? Okay? So they kind of get shoved through. But the mastery approach really kind of built in some safeguards to prevent them from just getting shoved through. It allowed them to move through at a pace that's appropriate to them. Now, again, not the be-all and end-all. This is my step 2 on my way to the student-centered environment. We're going to skip that. All right, so real quick, a little bit about mastery learning. Benjamin Bloom, back to Bloom's taxonomy, did some research on mastery learning in the late 70s and early 80s and found that it was an effective tool for students to learn and master material, mastery-based learning. The problem is it was killing their teachers. Here's why. One is, if people are moving through content and curriculum at their own pace, when do you deliver direct instruction? If you have a class of 40 kids, and they're all in a different place, when do you do the lesson on parabolas, let's say? Do you do it on Monday, whether or not they're ready for it? Do you get the make-your-own film strip kit and send the film strip home with the kid with the projector that they can project it on their wall? Okay, that probably didn't really exist in 1980. Okay, so when you deliver content was a problem. Now guess what? We can create a 5-minute video in 5 minutes and have it online in a matter of seconds and distribute it to anybody in the world. Okay, we don't have that limitation for content delivery. We can do it at any time, anywhere, 24/7 learning. The other part that was killing the teachers was assessment. Okay, if I want my kids to prove that they got it, I need to assess them. So I have a battery of assessments. I have multiple versions of the test. And they can take the first one. If they fail it, they take the second version. If they fail it, they take the third version. If they don't prove that they've mastered it, they take the fourth version. And yes, I created them all on paper, on a typewriter, and I grade them all by hand with a red pen. All multiple versions, many, many times. What are you going to do? You're never going to do anything but grade paper tests. Not the most effective or efficient use of anybody's time. Well, guess what? You can upload a test bank in Moodle or Blackboard or whatever LMS you have. You can create randomized questions. You can create mathematical questions that will even randomize the numbers within the randomized choices of questions to assess the same objectives and have thousands of permutations of the exams in a matter of a few hours. Okay? So that part solved. So the two major roadblocks that prevented mastery learning from taking off the 80s are no longer roadblocks. So what I found is I now had this very flexible learning environment where kids could move through my class as quickly or as slowly as they needed. I could provide them with the intervention that they needed because I wasn't spending most of my time delivering content. I was spending all my time walking around talking to every student in every class every day. And helping them and talking to them and putting little ad hoc groups together. Say, you all do not understand the same thing. Let's go over here and we're going to do a small group tutorial session. You all are doing fine. You two are not. Can you help them out? And I'm going to come back in and check on you in 10 minutes. And I didn't even have to do that. The kids would just start helping themselves. You saw like some peer tutoring going on in that video I just showed you. Kids, I didn't stage that. Those were just two kids that said, you know what, I need help. And that was one kid helping the other kid. They did it themselves. They just put themselves in these little groups. All right, so I have a flexible classroom. I've got content at my disposal to deliver to the kids when they're ready for it. But at that point, I was still requiring that every kid watched all my videos, did all my assignments, and took all my assessments. Notice the my in there. My videos, my assignments, my assessments. Then I learned about Universal Design for Learning. And Universal Design for Learning, if you don't know, is design. It's kind of built upon some of the tenets of Universal Design for Architecture. It used to be that we would build and design buildings so that most people could access them. Turns out they had a lot of stairs, a lot of places that made it really difficult for some people to get to. If you access the building on wheels, then guess what? You had to go like around the building in the back, where they may have put a ramp or have retrofitted it if they wanted, once ADA passed. But now the idea behind Universal Design for Architecture is you design for the fringe and everybody benefits. So I can get up a ramp just as easily as I can get up the stairs. But if I'm pushing a stroller, or if I'm in a wheelchair, I have to get in by the ramp. So if we design for the stroller and the wheelchair population, or we design the doorways for people who are 7.5 feet tall or 2 feet tall, guess what? We can all still access the building. So if we apply that to our classroom, the idea behind Universal Design for Learning is you design for the fringe. You design for your best and the brightest. You design for the kid who doesn't play school well. You design for the student with learning disabilities and the kid in your chemistry class who just wants to be an artist. And you design to meet their needs and everybody benefits. Instead of shooting for the middle and trying to get most, you shoot for the fringe and you get all. Okay, so there are 3 tenets for UDL, and you can just search UDL, Universal Design for Learning. I'm by no means an expert, but there are 2 of the 3 tenets that really resonated for me. One is that we need to allow students multiple ways to learn the stuff they need to learn. And the second is we need to allow students multiple ways to demonstrate their understanding of what they have learned. So I had this mastery system, my videos, my assignments, my assessment. And I had some kids that said, you know what, Sans, your videos are dumb, and I don't want to watch your videos. Can I just read the textbook? Yes, of course you can just read the textbook. Okay? Again, pedagogically, nothing new. Read the textbook at home, come to class, we talk about it. Watch the video at home, come to class, we talk about it. English teachers have been doing this for hundreds of years. This is nothing new. We're just leveraging a new medium of content delivery that's applicable to students. If I want to learn how to do something, where do I go? YouTube. My snowblower broke. I went to YouTube. I searched for the model number. And there's a video series of a complete breakdown and rebuild of my snowblower with some diagnostic videos. If it's doing this, try this. Had my computer, my laptop in my garage in the middle of January. It was freezing. And I fixed my snowblower from YouTube. I wanted to learn how to solve a Rubik's Cube. What did I do? I went to YouTube and I said, teach me, 14-year-old expert. And I watched a 5-minute video on how to solve a Rubik's Cube. And now I can do one in under a minute. Okay? So it's cool. That's where we go. That's where our students go. So I said, okay. If you want to watch my video, great. But not all students are going to learn best from that, just like not all students are going to learn best from a live lecture. If you want to read the textbook, do that. Here's my learning objective. If you just want to search that learning objective and see what pops, go. Guess what? Purdue and Texas A&M are like always the first 2 hits when people Google my learning objectives, and they're really good explanations. So I let students learn the stuff any way they wanted to. Then I said, okay, if you demonstrate your understanding any way you want to. You want to take my test? Do that. If you want to prove to me some other way that you've learned it, do that. All I care about is here are the learning objectives. Prove to me that you now understand them. Now, that was kind of a pipe dream that everybody would kind of come up with these amazing projects to demonstrate their understanding. Reality. 75% of my students still watched all my videos, did all of my assignments, my worksheets, and my labs, and did my assessments. 75%. You know why? That's how we train them to do school. For 10 years of their life, we've said, here's how you do school. The teacher teaches you stuff, you do a worksheet, you demonstrate their understanding through the test that they give you, and you spit it back to them. My kids were masters at the art of playing school. And guess what I did? I changed the rules. Now, I still had the option available to them to do all the traditional stuff, but I was not going to stand up and give them a live lecture to the class. I refused to budge on that. So, oh, but I can't learn from your video. Great, let's find some other way that we can learn that's not from my video. But I'm not going to stand up and just tell you exactly what to do and have you spit it back out. I want you to think, I want you to learn, I want you to prove to me that you've learned it. Okay? Now, the cool thing is once I gave them the flexibility to demonstrate their understanding in other ways, the sky was the limit. I had students who, for the rest, all of their other classes, they sat and did nothing. Were failing miserably. So I was talking to my student. I said, Steve, so how you doing in your other classes? Not so good. How you doing in here? Not so good. Why not? I haven't done anything. Well, why not? I don't know. So what are you into, Steve? I like music. Okay. Do you like to play music? Do you like to write? Like, I like to write songs. Cool. Steve, write me a song about gas laws, about gases in general. Okay. So he did. Over the course of the next hour and a half, he sat in there, he had his guitar in the back of the room. Okay, Sam's, I got it. So he sang this little song, played it on his guitar, of this song about gases. I said, cool. I said, now guess what? All that stuff you just told me about gases, let's look at my objectives that I want you to learn for gases. You address this one and this one. Guess what? You just got credit for that because you obviously understand these things. You would not have been able to tell me about them in that song. Really? Can I keep doing more? I said, yes, by all means. Just what I want you to do is take a look at these learning objectives and make sure you get those in your song. So that way I know that you're learning the stuff. Got it. Okay. Boom. So for the next 2 weeks, Steve was in the back of the room. I actually had a couch in my room. He was sitting on the couch, feet up, guitar playing, and he wrote songs about gas laws. Doing something is way better than doing nothing. Was it perfect? No. Did he get the math in there? No. He got all the conceptual things for my gas law problems, and that's way more than he would have gotten if he just would have sat and refused to do anything because he was disengaged. I had a student who wanted, I said, Jesse, what do you want to do with your life? I want to weld, Mr. Sams, and he was a really good welder. I'd seen some of his stuff. He did some industrial things, he did some artwork. I was like, man, that's awesome. I said, Jesse, you haven't done anything for me in about the last 2 months. Can we do something that's welding related to get you engaged in chemistry? He's like, I can do that? Yeah, that's the whole idea behind, you can prove to me other ways. It's like, oh, I never thought about doing it with welding. I said, well, atomic theory. Figure out how the atoms fit together. So, oh, okay, yeah, I got it. So he came up with this elaborate project of how he was going to test different types of welds on different types of metals using different types of welding rods, different cooling processes. And he built this device to test the strength of the weld and all this. I didn't see him for a month and a half. He would come back into my classroom every once in a while. He's down in the welding teacher's room. I cleared it with the teacher, and I said, is that okay? He goes, yeah, it's great. He down. He would come into my room like smoke, literally pouring off of his welding gear because he was just, he'd been welding away for the past 30, 40 minutes. Okay, Sam, so I'm working on this thing, and I'm thinking about the chemistry, and I got to, so we'd have a little conversation about atoms and the way they bonded together and all that stuff. He comes back at the end of the month, and he's got this amazing project of this amazing display of all the welds that he had tested. He brought in his device that he built. And he gave a little presentation for a small group of students. He didn't do it for the whole class because there were other students working on other things. But I said, all right, who wants to see what Jesse did? Had a little group of about 8 students and me. And we learned from Jesse how welding applies to chemistry. I didn't drive any of that. I said, you need to learn some stuff. Here's the stuff I need you to learn. Go. And he went. It was amazing. So this was my transition again. Now, every once in a while, he said, how does this work? I said, you know what? I got a little video on that. It's 4 minutes long. It's over. It's go to the class website. You're looking for video 8.4. That's the one you need. Boom. Go there. Got it. Cool. Boom. Back down to the welding room. He didn't even have to talk to me. I just had to direct him to the resource that he needed to get the answer to what he needed. Really amazing. So the other major transition that came along with that for me is standards-based grading, objective-based grading. So I hate points. And I don't like the idea of acquiring points to prove that you've learned something. And I even more despise extra credit to acquire more points to prove that you've learned something when you haven't actually learned anything. You've just brought in enough Kleenex boxes to get enough extra credit points to either pass the class or get the A that you don't deserve. So I transitioned to a standards-based grading. I used to have like 300 assignments in my grade book where every kid watched all my videos, did all my worksheets, did all my labs, did all my tests. So I had a million different things in my grade book, right? And all the kids had to do it all. Once I moved to this universally designed classroom where students could demonstrate their understanding in a different way, I'm like, well, how do I give them credit for a worksheet that they didn't do? Well, I don't need to. I need to assess their understanding of a learning objective. Did you learn the gas law objective number 2? So my grade book, I had 100 objectives. My grade book was 50 objectives semester 1, 50 objectives semester 2. And that's all that was in there. It didn't say worksheet 3.5 on chemical bonding. It was student understands how, atoms bond to form molecules, or some nuance of that. That was what was in my book, and then they had a number associated with it that I basically was thinking Marzano style, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 in my head, translated into a percentage number because that's what our parents and students understand. I made this transition. Don't tell anyone. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell my boss. I didn't tell my department chair. I didn't tell anybody. Guess what? I had 0 complaints. You know why? There was still a letter grade attached to it. When your parents log in to whatever portal you use, guess what they look for? Do they have the letter grade that I want my kid to have? If it's there, they don't call you. If it's not, they call you. If they're eligible to play X sport or activity, they don't call you. If they are ineligible to play X sport or activity, they call you. Or they call your boss, and they go over you. Okay? But I could tell you exactly what the student learned. I had something that they had produced that demonstrated that understanding, be that an exam that they took of mine or a project that they submitted, and I had a score of that. And I could tell you exactly what they knew and where they were in their progress, not how many worksheets they had completed and how many points they had acquired. Blew me away. This is huge. Natural transition. All right, inquiry. Science teachers in the room? Inquiry is a very important part of what we do. Okay? So the whole idea of front-loading with a video, starting with content, is completely contradictory to the idea of an inquiry-based learning environment. However, you can still leverage video in the middle of an inquiry-based learning environment. I quoted Ramsey Musallam earlier when I said we need to get out of the large group learning space, the direct instruction, into the individual learning space. He's a master of inquiry-based learning. He doesn't call it this anymore because he's trying to distance himself from the term flip because it has some baggage with it. And the baggage is front-loaded instruction. He's so passionate about inquiry, he doesn't want any of that baggage. So he's, well, what does he call it now? Cycles of Learning, I believe is his new website, cyclesoflearning.com. If it's not, I can find it for you. So he said, you know what? I will never front-load with content because I believe in inquiry. I do not believe that we should start with direct instruction. I believe students need to construct knowledge, and then we intervene when they are at their wits' end and can't get any further on their own. So that's what he does. The students engage in inquiry in the class. They explore concepts. They go through the process of concept development. Then, at the end of the day, he creates a video every single day for students and says, okay, here's kind of where everybody got, and here's the, here, I call it educational spackle. It smooths out the surface and fills in the holes. And it kind of gives them that extra nudge they need to get it, and then they apply what they learned the next day in class. And he just goes through this cycle of inquiry in his classroom every single day. It's really, really powerful. He's doing some research. He just got his doctorate from the University of San Francisco, and he's got some research exploring the front-loading model and the inquiry model, and his data shows that the inquiry approach is blowing the front-loading approach out of the water in terms of student concept development and content retention. So it's huge. So you don't have to front load video. All right, project-based learning. We heard a lot about that this morning. A lot of teachers are saying, I want to do more projects, but I have all this content I need to teach. That's true. We do have a lot of content we need to get through, but what if it's housed inside a project, like Jesse and his welding project, or Steve and his music project? These are student-generated projects, not artificially constructed ones that we give them with lots of hoops to jump through. It's, you have identified a problem that you want to solve or a project that you want to do, go, and I will help you figure out how the stuff of learning fits into that, and I can assess the stuff of learning based on your project. And when we're done, guess what? We can retroactively plan our day. You've done these objectives, so now as you plan your next project, don't do those because you've obviously mastered those. Since there's some stuff you need to learn for this chemistry class, why don't you focus on these? And here's how we can take what you've already done and some of your interests and we can cater to the content as well as your interests together. And you as a teacher, you as a practitioner can help the students customize those things. All right, context. This is huge. We have so much stuff that students learn, and again, we are bound by standards, and I have no problem with standards. I helped write the Colorado ones, for crying out loud. They're decent. We need to, okay, you know, like this is like the baseline of what chemistry is. You got to know that stuff. But how you access the content and the context in which you learn that is going to vary greatly from a tiny little mountain town in Colorado to a school in the middle of a city. It's just different. You engage with the world around you differently in these different places. So the master of providing context is Jason Kern. He's an economics teacher that I know in Dallas. And what he does is he creates content videos the night before that everybody watches, and he provides context in the class. So an example would be supply and demand. Here's a video on supply and demand, and go watch that at home. You come to class the next day, and he picks up the newspaper. The Dallas Mavericks just won the NBA Finals. How does this apply to supply and demand go? And they have a conversation and a discussion about the application of what they've learned in a context that's meaningful to them. And it changes from day to day, from year to year. He just tweaks it and modifies it on the fly. All right, so the last component is professional development. Administrators in here, content coaches, IT type people. Okay. Flip your professional development for crying out loud. Why do you get 100 people in the library on a Thursday afternoon to teach them something new is beyond me. At 3:30 on a Thursday, all I'm thinking of is I got to pick my kids up and I really would like a beer when I get home. That's just my thought process at 3:30. So professional development, providing professional development opportunities when teachers are ready for it. And you can provide coaching and support for them in your site, at your district, or whatever it happens to be, through some online interfaces, through face-to-face contact, things like that. But give them the flexibility that they need. Instead of shooting for the middle, shoot for the fringe. All right, so I'm running out of time, so I need to wrap up here pretty quick. Elementary teachers. Elementary teachers in the room? Anybody? Okay. So a lot of people are like, oh, you're just a high school chemistry teacher. This only applies to high school chemistry and math, and high school chemistry, math, and science. That's not true. I know teachers K through college who are taking elements of using video as an instructional tool and applying it into their classroom. Now, I went all in. All of my direct instruction for all of my lessons, I have one video per learning objective. Some of them are better than others. Some of them lend themselves better to that form of instruction than others do, and I'll talk more about that in my afternoon session. But elementary teachers, I'm finding, they're thinking flipped learning. They're thinking flipped lesson, not flipped classroom. Strategic use of a specific topic or specific objective that students need to learn that will naturally lend itself to that form of instruction. This teacher in particular up in the Chicago area, and her name is escaping me for that I can't remember for the life of me. Yeah, sorry, my colleague John, he works with her and he usually does this slide and we present together and I forgot her name. I apologize. Anyhow, elementary teacher, she says, I need the video after I've looked the kid in the eye and said, apple. I don't want them to learn that wrong with me not in the room. But what I am going to do is I'm going to provide this video for them to watch a 2-minute video at home to then go and extend what they've learned to something new or to a broader application, and then they can come and apply it when they come the next day. Almost like the Explore, Flip, and Apply model that Ramsey uses in San Francisco. You know, you can flip a PE classroom. PE teachers. I spend way too much time teaching my kids the rules of pickleball, and they don't get enough time to play pickleball. Guess what? Archive the rules and the content onto a video. They can watch that outside of class. They come to class. Guess what? They can play the game. And then this particular teacher up in Illinois says, I have to assess my students as mandated by the state on the rules of pickleball. Guess what he did? He shifted his assessment out of the classroom as well. Put it on a learning management system, set up some time frames in which the students can take it, and said, take your test online. We're not spending PE time to take your test on pickleball. We're going to play some stinking pickleball. All right? I didn't even know what pickleball was until I met it. It's like tennis inside with like a big paddle and a little red ball, in case you don't know it. Is pickleball, do you play pickleball here? I don't know. Anyhow, April, a good friend of mine in Colorado, she has taken the concept to her high school literature class. She does one video per unit, and it's an overview of the life of William Blake, whoever it may be. Here is the historical context in which this person lived, and now we're going to read their writing, and we're going to see how that historical context is played out in how we see that in their writing, or how that influenced the historical content. So very broad, sweeping overviews before they start a unit of overviews of content. She also uses the video capture, screen capture technology to grade students' papers. So completely different approach using the same technology. She pulls up their electronic document, she does a screen recording of her talking through the document, annotating it with a digital pen. She sends back the annotated document and the video file to the students. She takes them all down to the computer lab, they put on headsets, they listen to her, and they look at their document and they make any appropriate changes, and then they send it back to her. So this is in the middle of the revision process. She said it takes her just as much time to grade it digitally like that and mark it up as it does to do with a red pen. And it's more meaningful to students because they get to hear her thought process instead of just seeing some static text on a page scribbled in red pen, you know, with a slosh of coffee on it next to it. So very powerful tool. All right, so like I said, I see this whole idea of the flipped classroom and flipped learning as a stepping stone or a bridge from the teacher-centered, content-driven classroom to a student-centered classroom that still maintains quality control of content and educational standards. It's a great way to make that transition. Now, in case you haven't noticed, I have a pretty high tolerance for change. I tweak and modify and just change things. I mean, what you're seeing, the story I kind of just told you, is a progression over the course of 6 years. Now, high tolerance for change, 6 years. Some teachers are like, might take you longer. Maybe it won't. Maybe I've learned the hard way enough where you don't have to. Hopefully, there are enough of us that are out there kind of on the bleeding edge of this, where we've learned the hard way, we've answered all the questions, where you can just kind of roll in and try some things out and progress at a faster rate than we did. That doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight, but I really do see it as a stepping stone or a bridge. We don't have time to hear from Steve, but basically Steve said, I can finally do all this stuff. He said, making videos was great, but making videos was I was still the same teacher I was in 1994. But having access to content, video content that I created for my students based on their learning needs, it allowed me to do all this other stuff. All right, so takeaway. Flipped learning is not about videos, and it's not magic, and it's not an excuse for bad teaching. Okay, you could be a lazy teacher by just saying, here, watch this, here's a packet of worksheets, your assessments are online, I'm going to sit and shop on Amazon and check baseball scores all day long during class. I've witnessed this happen in my own building. Okay, it's sad, okay, but it's no excuse. So don't let this inspire you to be a better teacher, not a bad one. Piece of the puzzle. It's a tool in your toolbox. This is something that you can leverage when it's appropriate. It may be appropriate to make an entirely systemic change in your class or your school, or it may be appropriate to flip 3 lessons in over your school year. Either way, this is a technique that you're using in your classroom. This is not a new pedagogy. Okay? This is not on the same plane as constructivism. This is not the same. It's a tool. It's something you're going to use to improve the learning of your students. All right, so where do I see things heading? This has to change. Best decision I ever made is I put a couch in my room, I put desks in little pods, I created testing stations around my room, and if I didn't teach in a chemistry classroom, I probably would have had more of those exercise balls for chairs and lots of beanbags. Because that's the kind of environment my kids worked best in. That's the kind of environment I work best in. My new job, it was a desk in a closet, basically. I got rid of the desk the second week I got there, and I really disrupted people's lives that I don't have a desk in my office. I have a leather chair, I have 2 other chairs for guests to sit in, and I have a coffee table with an actual coffee station in the middle. It's a place for people to meet and talk, and for me to work on my laptop. Sometimes I wander around. But this has to change, and it is changing. There are actually furniture companies going, okay, so if more teachers do this, what kind of stuff do we need to design to help their classroom look differently? So I'm like talking to furniture designers, trying to help them plan what the classroom needs to look like and how their furniture design needs to differ. This is Paul Anderson. Go to YouTube and do a search for Paul Anderson or Bozeman Biology. He teaches biology in Bozeman, Montana. Just a great guy in general. But did a 10-minute TEDx talk, TEDx Bozeman last year, on how he changed his classroom. We saw a clip of one of his videos in the sampler. Because he had video, and very high-quality ones that he made, I might add, he turned his classroom into a game. And students go through the content and they level up. And now they don't actually play the video game, but it's designed like a video game. It's really, really cool and very, very powerful way to learn. To be honest, I'm still on the fence with the idea of gamification, but go look at what he's doing. If anyone's doing it well, it's going to be Paul. Hiring administrators. You have to hire content experts, don't get me wrong. We have to be content area experts. But are you going to hire the good presenter of content? Or maybe you already have one of those, and you can film that teacher, and then you need to hire an assessment guru. Or you need to hire someone who's really good at developing in-class activities that students can do instead of sitting and listening to content. So it could change that. Okay, differentiation. Finally, after years of being a classroom teacher, I was able to differentiate for my students. Steve, the student who played the guitar, got a different educational experience than another student who's going to go be a chemical engineer in my class at the same time. I was finally able to do that because I had the flexibility to do that, because I had the resources available at my disposal to do that, to customize what the students needed to learn and how they were going to go about learning it. I was never a good differentiator before. I finally got to the point where I was. Ultimately, though, I want to get us to the point where we are personalizing the education of each student. And this is a lot of work, and it's going to take a long time to get here. It used to be you go down to the car lot, and you picked out either the red one, the blue one, the black one, or the silver one. Okay? Now, you can basically design the thing online and customize what you want, do all your financing, and go down to the dealer and pick it up. Okay? So business has figured out the idea of personalization and customization. Why are we so far behind as educators? I don't know, but I want to get there. And something I did not do a good job with student-created content. I was just getting there. And I'm hoping that more of you get there quicker than I am. But to be honest, kids creating content is awesome. So mathtrain.tv, a guy named Eric Marcos, he teaches in Santa Monica, California, in the LA area. He has an after-school math club, and students come in on their own time, of their own volition, and they create math videos. And he's created, his math curriculum is taught by students. They created on their own because they wanted to. He had a student develop the website and also an iPad app. And the student created stuff. He did nothing. All he does is he shows up and lets them use his toys. And they did it all themselves. So that's where I would really like to see this head. All right, finally, hopefully I've generated more questions than I've answered for you, because I really want us to get out of the mindset of cramming as many kids as we can through our system, giving them enough points to keep their parents off their back, and hopefully they get the GPA that they need to get into the college they want, to get the scholarship that they need. Now, college scholarships, important stuff. But is it worth sacrificing the education of our children so that they can get enough points to get what they want? I say no. If you want more nuts and bolts on kind of how to actually implement this and roll it out in your classroom, I'll be talking more about that this afternoon at 1:30, so feel free to come back. We'll be in this room as well. The big question that everybody inevitably has to ask is, now what do I do in my classroom? If I've removed all the content delivery, what do I do next? I don't have that answer. As a high school chemistry teacher, you're going to learn all sorts of stuff at this conference. Go to another conference that's content specific for you, and all that stuff that they're talking about that you go to them, you're like, oh, I'd love to do that, but I got those state standards I got to do. Right? You can do it. And you can do it all. You can maintain quality state standards, and you can get to the project-based student-centered learning through this particular approach. Again, fliplearning.org, lots of resources there. I've talked about that. We're doing some research. Buy my book. I might actually make enough to take my wife out on a date one of these days. There's no money in publishing, by the way. It's published by ISTE and ASCD joint work. Book number 2 is coming out hopefully next year. I just got an email while I'm standing here, and it's probably my publisher, who we're working with. But join the If you do nothing else, go to flipclassroom.org and join. Network, ask lots of questions. There's some great people who are very active on there sharing ideas. Our network, fliplearning.org, is conducting webinars. Here are the dates and the subject areas. You can sign up at fliplearning.org to get in on those. So those are a lot of fun. We're doing those in conjunction with Cisco and TechSmith. They're sponsoring those events. One-day workshops, most of these are past. Got one in Illinois if you happen to be in the Chicago area. And we constantly add more. Our conference this summer, June 17th through 19th, Stillwater High School, Stillwater, Minnesota. Last year we had 300 people. We're hoping to get 600 people to show up this year. We'll have presenters in different subject areas talking about how they're applying this concept. And then this year we're focusing primarily on, if you use video as an instructional tool, what are you going to do in class after that? And bringing in people who are not necessarily flipped learning experts, but just like content area experts or other types of pedagogical experts, and telling you about what you can do in your class instead of delivering direct instruction. All right. So that's it. I'm gonna kind of hang out in here. I might go out and play with some of the stuff, and then I do have a few people I need to chat with at lunch. But if you have any questions or want to stick around, you're welcome to do that. I'd be happy to to talk to you. If you just need contact information, it's there. If you want a hard copy of something to take back, there you go. Business card, you can grab one of those as well. Anyhow, thanks for coming. Hopefully I'll see you this afternoon. Tell all your friends.